Hi everybody! So today I will be telling you all my story of how I ended up at the University of Pittsburgh studying education. And science had a major role in how I ended up at Pitt, and I'm very excited to tell you all how. So let's get started. This is my story so far. So it all starts in the Research Triangle, and for those of you who don't know, the Research Triangle is located in North Carolina and consists of 3 cities, Durham, Raleigh, and Chapel Hill. So I was born in Duke Hospital and grew up going back and forth between there and Chicago. And at the time, my mama was working towards her doctorate in immunology, so I'd often join her in the lab when she had to go and check on experiments. So this is where I had my first experience with science. She would give me pipettes in little vials to practice with, and I would spend hours pipetting water into tubes. I loved it. And as I grew up, I asked more and more questions and got a good understanding of how a lab works and how to create experiments. So this is where my love for science really started, and I have my mom to thank for that. She still works at UNC and is now the Associate Dean of Research there. She and her lab are actually studying the coronavirus right now and trying to get a better understanding of how it works. So she is my superhero. Go mama, keep it up. I have a few pictures here of Chapel Hill. So I have this one, the logo, as well as a picture of my mom, me, and my brother attending a UNC basketball game. Don't worry, Pitt fans, I still cheer for Pitt in basketball, even if they play UNC. All right, the next location I have is actually my junior high school. So like I said, I grew up going back and forth between Chicago and North Carolina. So here I grew up with my dad. And I added this slide because this is where my love for science was really solidified. I participated in 2 science fairs here and loved them both. So the process of developing a question and a way to test it excited me. My first project was actually on deforestation. So I tested how much erosion occurred with 3 different groups. One that had many plants, one with little plants, and one that had no plants. Obviously, I found that more erosion occurred when no roots were there to keep the dirt in place, so the group with no plants. And so I chose this project to illustrate what was happening, and still is happening, in rainforests, and how this affects our world as a whole. So this is one of the projects that made me want to look at problems in the world and find ways to solve them. So that's why I included this slide. Science really had a big influence on me here. So along with being a science nerd in junior high, and proud of it, I played volleyball here, and we had an undefeated season where we came first in state. So lots of good memories right here. After that, I went to high school just down the road at Lincoln Way North. Let's go Phoenix, that's our mascot. I had really great memories here as well. But the class that most influenced my path in life was actually my AP chemistry class. I remember we had a lab where we were given 12 different substances that we needed to identify. We were given a list of possibilities and experiments we could try to figure it out. And so I loved this lab because I'm a planner and I like to try to figure things out. So I created chart after chart after chart to organize which experiments should go first or which substance I thought was what. And so based on that lab, and actually the class as a whole, I decided my senior year to major in chemistry when I went to college, which is actually one of the reasons why I chose to go to the University of Pittsburgh, as they have an amazing chemistry program. Also, I do love the Penguins, which kind of helped in my decision. So I also have some photos here. This is what my high school looked like. Obviously, we're home of the Phoenix. And unfortunately, my class was actually the last class to graduate. My high school had to shut down after only 8 years of being open because our superintendent was caught embezzling funds. So that wasn't fun, but I'm happy to have graduated from there. But unfortunately, it is no longer a high school as of right now. So from there, I obviously chose to attend the University of Pittsburgh. Hail to Pitt. And I obviously had amazing times here as well, but the one formative year that I had was actually during my sophomore year. So I took a class about deaf culture, and during my time at Pitt, starting my freshman year, I started working towards my American Sign Language certificate, and I fell in love with deaf culture and the language as a whole. But in this class specifically, I learned that only 2% of children have access to education in sign language, meaning there were students out there who were deaf who were not learning due to a language barrier. So this fact, as well, again, as the class as a whole, made me realize that I prefer education over science. I still very much love science and chemistry, but I know I'm much happier in education. Because I want to work with populations of students that have different preferred methods of communication than spoken English. So that could be ASL or augmentative communication devices. So shortly after this class, I changed my major to education and I joined the CASE program. I can now say that I'm much happier, but I do miss chemistry lab occasionally. Not OChem though. I'm okay that I miss out on that. If I did not attend the University of Pittsburgh, I probably would not have taken ASL or changed my major to education, so I'm very grateful for all the professors and programs here that have helped me along the way. So I have some pictures here as well. There's Kathy, who doesn't love her. Graduation pictures that I'm very proud of. There's some there. And yeah. All right, so the next place that I have is actually right downtown and is called the Pittsburgh Association of the Deaf. So I included this slide because it's where I got to meet a lot of deaf individuals who are willing to share their experiences with me. So the PAD is a place where deaf members get together to socialize and play games. Pittsburgh, like the PAD, is very important in the deaf community because this is their place where it's fully in sign language, there's no speaking, and it's just a place where they can feel connected, right? So I attended events here for my classes, but made friends along the way. So before COVID, you could find me here on Saturday nights playing bingo and practicing my signing. I was lucky enough to meet people there that were willing to share their experiences with me about growing up in a mainstream school where there's no support for sign language. So they were basically learning in a classroom where the teacher was speaking, but they were deaf, so they'd have to read lips or kind of have to learn on their own, right? Those are very, very interesting conversations that I've had. So there I have learned very much about the deaf culture, while also making friendships that have now lasted for the past 4 years. And I'm going to show you some of the friends I made. So this is my friend Allison and I at our very first deaf event we attended back as freshmen, and it was a bingo night. So these are some of the lovely ladies that I talk to on a regular basis when I go. So from left to right, we have Anne, myself, Joyce, Shirley, and Barry. So these lovely ladies obviously quickly became my friends and still share their experiences with me today. Awesome. So from there, I'm going to talk about my study abroad experience, which was very fun. So I couldn't not add this. So I had the opportunity to study abroad at the University College London. And there, I actually studied the difference between British Sign Language and American Sign Language. So they're actually very different, unlike the two spoken languages. So while ASL uses one hand for the alphabet, BSL uses two. And it was very funny because as I was there, I got to talk to teachers who used BSL, and they looked at me and said, wow, that must be really hard only using one hand. And I looked at them and said, wow, that must be really hard using two hands for the alphabet. So it's definitely a little bit of a cultural difference there. That was interesting. So during this experience, I saw one amazing school that provided full access to education in sign language. All of their students were engaged. The teachers were passionate about what they were doing and involved. And then I saw one that wasn't so great. There were teachers talking/speaking over the students, even though they knew that students could not understand what they were saying. It just was overall a very disheartening experience, but it only inspired me more to ensure all students have access to education in their preferred method of communication. So I had a wonderful time in London and have included some pictures here. So this is us at the Tower Bridge. These are all the girls that were in ASL with me. There's a guard that was always on duty at the Tower of London. Here we were at the Sky Garden, so it's on top of this really tall building. It's a beautiful garden inside. You can go outside and see the whole city of London, and there's a restaurant there as well. Very pretty. This is the alphabet that I was talking about. So BSL uses two hands, so this is a rug on the floor of one of the schools that I visited. The London Eye. And this is very interesting. So in the UK, they have something that's called live interpreting, which is basically there's a little box at the bottom corner of the screen for TV, and they have a live interpreter actually signing the show in sign language rather than just captions, which is really awesome because it's in the first language of deaf people. So we actually got to go to the studio and see these people live interpret it. And the interpreters are deaf, so they're reading the screens as you can see here. The different colors show different characters, and they are interpreting as the show is playing. So it's live. It's very difficult. It requires a lot of preparation and training, but we actually got the chance to try it out. So this is me and my friend Gretchen trying this out. We were doing it in ASL, not BSL, thank goodness, but we were interpreting a show, a kid's show about a dog named Dougie, who he and his friends go and try to make the perfect kite. So I'll show you a little bit of it here. So as you can tell, we're a little bit off for signing after they already said it. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. Obviously, the live interpreters are much better than myself. But that's what I got to do in London, and I really enjoyed it, and it really influenced me to just push harder for my students to have access to their education in their preferred method of communication. So this brings me to my next slide. So after my study abroad experience in London, I was actually placed at the Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. If you couldn't tell, I love talking about ASL and deaf culture, so I was very excited to be placed here for our special education practicum. I worked with students who had multiple disabilities as well as a variety of hearing ranges. So we spoke and used sign language at the same time, so all students could have the appropriate access to education that they needed. And here I actually saw science in action in the form of technology. It was super important for my classroom especially. So many of my students used augmentative communication devices. So we had iPads that people used. We had a smart board that they could come up and press if they needed something. And these were essential to not only their education, but their quality of life. So without that technology, they wouldn't have a way to express their needs and their wants and their desires. And I actually had an experience where we had a student come in who didn't have a way of communicating, didn't know any sign, was nonverbal, and we actually were able to get her to use an iPad to start making requests. And immediately her challenging behavior diminished. She stopped hitting and kicking and pinching because she had a way to communicate what she wanted appropriately, and it was effective. So that was really an eye-opener for me of this is what I want to do with my education degree. So it was an amazing experience. I would love to work here if they're hiring after this grad year. And I made some really amazing friends too with the teachers there. And then here are some pictures of it. It's a beautiful campus, beautiful school. Some students actually stay in dorms all year round as well, because we have many students that come from all across the country to the school. That's a little bulletin board that we had. All right, so this brings me to my last slide, which is Central Elementary School. So this is actually where I am placed this year. So I'll be working with teachers through the online Hampton Academy, as well as in person in a second grade classroom. So I'm going to do a little bit of both, as students have a choice this year if they want to come back to school or if they want to learn online. It'll be an interesting year for sure, but I'm looking forward to the challenges and the new technology skills that I will learn from this experience. So we start next week with students, and I cannot wait. I've missed teaching kiddos. It's been a long summer. And yeah, so now you know my story and how I ended up where I am today. So I hope you enjoyed, and thanks.